Thomas and Terence. Thomas, Terence and the Snow. Autumn was changing the leaves from green to brown. The fields were changing too, from yellow stubble to brown earth. As Thomas puffed along, he heard the chug, chug, chug of a tractor at work. One day, stopping for a signal, he saw the tractor close by. "Hello," said the tractor. "I'm Terence. I'm ploughing." "I'm Thomas, and I'm pulling a train. What ugly wheels you've got." "They're not ugly, they're caterpillars," said Terence. "I can go anywhere. I don't need rails." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Thomas, huffily. "I like my rails, thank you." Thomas often saw Terence working, but though he whistled, Terence never answered. Winter came, and with it dark, heavy clouds full of snow. "I don't like it," said Thomas' driver. "A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us." "Rubbish," said Thomas, seeing the snow melt off the rails. "Soft stuff, nothing to it." And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but the country was covered, and the rails were two dark lines standing out in the white snow. "You'll need your snow plough on for next journey, Thomas," said his driver. "Rubbish. Snow is silly soft stuff. It won't stop me." "Listen to me," said his driver. "We're going to fix on your snow plough, and I want no nonsense, please." The snow plough was heavy and uncomfortable, and it made Thomas cross. He shook it and he banged it, and when they got back it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. "You're a very naughty engine," said his driver as he shut the shed door that night. Next morning, both driver and fireman came early and worked hard to mend the snow plough, but they couldn't make it fit properly. It was time for the first train. Thomas was pleased. "I shan't have to wear it. I shan't have to wear it," he puffed to Annie and Clarabelle, his coaches. "Well, I hope it's all right. I hope it's all right," they whispered anxiously to each other. The driver was anxious too. "Well, it's not bad here," he said to the fireman, "but it's sure to be deep snow in the valley." It was snowing again when Thomas started, but the rails were not covered. "Silly soft stuff, silly soft stuff," he puffed. "I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't today. Snow can't stop me." And he rushed into a tunnel, thinking how clever he was. At the other end, he saw a heap of snow fallen from the sides of the cutting. "Silly old snow," said Thomas, and charged it. "Cinders and ashes," said Thomas. "I'm stuck." And he was. "Back, Thomas, back," said his driver. Thomas tried, but his wheels spun, and he couldn't move. More snow fell and piled up around him. The guard went back for help, while the driver, firemen, and passengers tried to dig the snow away. But as fast as they dug, more snow slipped down until Thomas was nearly buried. "Oh, my wheels and coupling rods," said Thomas. "I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. What a silly engine I am." And Thomas began to cry. At last, a tooting in the distance told them a bus had come for the passengers. Then Terence chugged through the tunnel. He pulled the empty coaches away and came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun helplessly when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and tugged, and at last dragged Thomas into the tunnel. "Oh, thank you, Terence. Your caterpillars are splendid," Thomas said gratefully. "I hope you'll be sensible now, Thomas," said his driver severely. "I'll try," said Thomas as he puffed home. Chapter 2. Thomas Goes Fishing. Thomas's branch line had a station by a river. As he rumbled over the bridge, he would see people fishing. Sometimes they stood quietly by their lines. Sometimes they were actually jerking fish out of the water. Thomas often wanted to stay and watch, but his driver said, "No, what would the Fat Controller say if we were late?" Thomas thought it would be lovely to stop by the river. "I should like to go fishing," he said to himself longingly. Every time he met another engine, he would say, "I want to fish." They all answered, "Engines don't go fishing." "Silly, stuck in the muds," he would snort impatiently. Thomas generally had to take in water at the station by the river. One day he stopped as usual, and his fireman put the pipe from the water tower in his tank. Then he turned on the tap, but it was out of order and no water came. "Bother," said Thomas. "I am thirsty." "Never mind," said his driver. "We'll get some water from the river." They found a bucket and some rope and went to the bridge. Then the driver let the bucket down to the water. The bucket was old and had 5 holes in it. They had to fill it, pull it up, and empty it into Thomas's tank as quickly as they could. "There's a hole in my bucket, dear Liza," sang the fireman. "Never mind about Liza," said the driver. "You empty that bucket before you spill the water over me." They finished at last. "Oh, that's good, puffed Thomas as he started, and Annie and Clarabelle the coaches ran happily behind. They puffed along the valley and were in the tunnel when Thomas began to feel a pain in his boiler, while steam hissed from his safety valve in an alarming way. "Oh, there's too much steam," said his driver, and his fireman opened up the tap in the feed pipe to let more water into the boiler, but none came. "Oh dear," groaned Thomas. I'm going to burst. They damped down his fire and struggled on. "Oh, I've got such pain, Thomas hissed. Just outside the last station they stopped, uncoupled Annie and Clarabelle, and ran Thomas, who was still hissing, fit to burst, onto a siding right out of the way. While the guard telephoned for an engine inspector and the fireman was putting out the fire, the driver wrote notices in large letters, which he hung on Thomas's front and behind. "Danger! Keep away!" Soon the inspector and the Fat Controller arrived. "Cheer up, Thomas. We'll soon put you right," he said. The driver told them what had happened. "Ah, so feed pipe's blocked," said the inspector. "I'll just have a look in the tanks." He climbed up and peered in, and then came down. Excuse me, sir," he said to the Fat Controller. "Please look in the tank and tell me what you see." Certainly, Inspector." And he clambered up and looked in, and nearly fell off in surprise. "Inspector," he whispered, "can you see fish?" "Gracious goodness me," said the Fat Controller. "How did the fish get in there, driver?" Thomas's driver scratched his head. "Well, we must have fished them from the river," and he told him about the bucket. The Fat Controller laughed. "Well, Thomas, So you and your driver have been fishing, but fish don't suit you and we must get them out. So the driver and the fireman fetched rods and nets, and they all took turns at fishing in Thomas's tank, while the Fat Controller told them how to do it. When they had caught all the fish, the station master gave them some potatoes, the driver borrowed a frying pan, while the fireman made a fire beside the line and did the cooking. They all had a lovely picnic supper of fish and chips. Well, that was good, said the Fat Controller as he finished his share. But fish don't suit you, Thomas, so you mustn't do it again. No, sir, I won't, said Thomas. Engines don't go fishing. It's too uncomfortable. The end.